Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here as always with my good friend, colleague, and co-host Jim Gurley. Another robust pregame, and what we came to today was we're going to talk about the concept of self-doubt, and we're going to connect it to the idea of how our subconscious minds work. Because self-doubt, Jim, as we were talking about, is one of many kind of emotions or conditions that our subconscious can take us, sometimes unbeknownst to us. And then I think the other thing that's relevant, it's kind of foundational to the conversation, is that it's scientific. It's a fact. The only argument I think would be the specific number, but somewhere between 85 and 95% of the thoughts that we think are in our subconscious. So it makes sense that whatever our subconscious is trained to do is going to drive the majority of our behavior. But it also makes sense that we can address some of these things and we can, so to speak, treat them so that we're hopefully living with more positive emotions floating around in there than more negative emotions. But yeah, self-doubt also connects nicely to the wheel because it comes right out of the self in the middle. So Jim, I'll pass it over to you, but that's the context for the discussion. And oh, by the way, before I do that, I remembered again, got to get in the habit of this. If this stuff resonates with you, we really could use your support, and it's easy support. It's just going over to Apple and giving us a review and some stars. That creates exposure. And as I've said before, I think we have content here that's helpful to people. So let's see if we can help more people. And anything you can do in that regard would be much appreciated.
Yeah, Mark, this topic is something that is always going on. I think it fits into our framework very well in terms of our five areas of life, and then the centers, the selves. We have a library of, I think, almost 30, 40 selves, and it continues to grow. But the one that we always start off with every episode is being self-aware
Mm-hmm.
and self-aware in relationship to these five areas of our life, which in no particular order, but our profession, our relationships with others, our health, mental health, physical health, our um, our relationship with the world, and our relationship with money. So this particular episode of I was listening to this morning that made me think of this was related to self doubt and how self doubt plays a role in our income and our ability to make money, or even our limitations to make money. But I think it applies to every part of our life. So yeah, self doubt, and I'll just read one of the quotes that was mentioned. It was self doubt is a killer of dreams. When you live with self doubt, when you live with fear, when you live with guilt and shame, this is a lower level frequency. So it's a frequency that maybe you're questioning something that happened at another part of time of your life. And then I know you have a background in this area. So when you had mentioned um, the mind, the human mind, the mechanics of a human mind, that it's processing information based on its subconscious 85% of the time. It is going in and taking memories and experiences, and then you're making decisions every day based on that. So self-awareness ties right into this topic. But yeah, I do think we all do this, whether we're self-aware of it or not. I don't think it means there's something wrong with us. It's just a matter of being aware of these past experiences and how much of it is driving outcomes in our life. So I thought it
Yeah, I
fit
think
very well into our framework of what we talk about every week. And yeah, so that's
and there's room for almost everything inside of our framework, it seems.
it seems to be that way, right?
I'm thinking of all the people that I know well and the various degrees of, I guess, control, for lack of a better phrase, that they have on all of these energetic emotions, positive or negative. Because I think, at 60 something, we all have enough encounters with people that we know narcissists, we know bipolar people, we know depressed people, we know joyous people, we know optimistic people. So, what is it that the optimistic, hopeful, happy people have that the depressed, anxious, angry people don't have? And is there an opportunity there to exercise some self-control. And I believe that there is. I think my exposure to different scientists and different therapists and different humans, I believe that what you've just said, what I've just said, that, if 85 to 95% of what we do is based on something in our subconscious, and we could exercise control over what that subconscious was doing, that's a good thing, right? And
Hmm.
I do it. The tools I use, and to your point, Jim, you don't perfect this. I think you have
Hmm.
gradations of good or bad, but I think it's like exercise. I think it's a
Hmm.
little conscious thought, redirection, positive vibes, maybe some journaling, meditation, prayer, exercise. All those things I
Yeah.
think are available to all of us if we
Yeah.
believe in this concept that we've just thrown out on the table and we want to do
Yeah.
something about it.
But you said you think it's a good thing. I actually think it's a really bad thing because most people, especially if they have um, anger or they have resentment, that they're pushing that out with everything they do in life. So yeah, it can be good if you're aware of it and you're working on it. But I do think most people are walking around very angry and they push that out, whether they're self aware or not. It is a
Yeah, just
frequency. I've always believed that as humans, we communicate with vibration as much as we do with actual words. So the word frequency, I think, applies to this. It is a frequency that we're pushing out, whether we're aware of it or not. There's no doubt if, I mean, again, we'll just use business and sports leadership. Great leaders are dealers of hope, hope
mhm.
of a better moment, hope of better times, and and that releases dopamine that gets people excited, that makes them do things they otherwise wouldn't do. So I do think to be a good leader, you have to have a high level of vibration and optimism in order to
Yeah,
motivate people to do things they otherwise wouldn't do. And not everybody
yeah.
has that ability.
No,
But
I think
yeah,
that to make a correction on something, I was not suggesting by any means that negative emotions in the subconscious are a good thing. What I was suggesting is that the good thing is that we have the ability to control it.
oh, I see. Thank you. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
if you're self-aware of it, right? Yeah.
yeah. Well, like you've said 100 times, I mean, self-awareness is the start of any progress in my estimation. It's like
That's
a
right.
foundational discussion with yourself about where you are, why you're there, what's good, what's bad, what do you want to do about it. I mean, it's just a great. I have that conversation with every prospect I've ever talked to my whole life.
Hmm.
That's the starting point because that's where you
Hmm.
calibrate everything. You know,
Hmm.
you're looking for alignment, you're looking for all that stuff, but yeah,
Yeah.
self-doubt is you said it in the pregame. So we all have self-doubt at periods of time, and
Yeah.
whether it's conscious or unconscious, you know, if you're not, I suppose if you're not experiencing some self-doubt, you're probably not stretching yourself enough. If nothing
Hmm.
scares you, you're not doing anything scary, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways of thinking about this.
Yeah. Well, it's the opposite too. Again, there's a negative and a positive, but when you live with joy, when you live with gratitude and appreciation and love, it's a higher frequency. So you push that out. But if you're living in self-doubt, again, that's living in guilt, shame, resentment, anger, frustration, and it shrieks your energy and pushes that out. So there is a different, and I don't think everybody can always be on, right? I think it's
No,
normal to have
no.
uh, good days and bad days, um,
I'll
and
tell you,
then
Jim,
making adjustments. Yeah.
there are two things that pop into my mind. One is I've told you this story before. I went to this yoga thing a couple of years ago with my daughters and my girlfriend, and they were doing those sound bowls. This woman was like, she had a bunch of skills that were all kind of in the mindfulness space. And she asked the crowd, it was a small crowd, does anybody
Yeah.
want me to do an energy reading on them? And
Yeah.
I'm like, what does that entail? She goes, I just put my hands over your head and I'll give you feedback. And she did a couple people in the room and it was uneventful. And then she put her hands over my head and she shrieked. She jumped up and shrieked. And I'm like, what the hell was that? She said, you have so much positive energy coming out of you. It's palatable. So I'm like, that's happened to me more than once. Right.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
also remember in my darkest times, I was the momentum guy at my company. I was the energy guy. And when I lost my energy, I started to lose my company. So
Yeah.
I'm a big
Interesting.
fan of energy being a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Another one that comes into this is self-sabotage. I think with self-doubt, uh, often self-sabotage will come in. You'll sabotage something whether you're aware of it or not. That's an interesting one because you don't know whether you're sabotaging it or that's your intuition telling you something's wrong, and you're picking
Yeah,
up on it.
yeah. I really it keeps coming back to self-awareness, doesn't it? You have to, yeah, and this is another thing, it's not political, but it's like if you don't have the ability to disagree with somebody, you're going to have a lot of negative energy. And
Yeah.
so we have to figure out a way as a people, as a culture, I think, to have this civil disagreement again, because it used to be, you remember, it used to be you could disagree with somebody about a sports team, about a politician, about an whatever it is, right? A law. And it was like, okay, you got your opinion, I got mine. Let's go shoot the shit. You know, we lost that. And I
Well,
think,
part of that is because so much communication is done through text or through a platform where you're not responsible or you don't look somebody in the eyes. It's back to vibration. If
mhm,
writing something and sending a thought is very different than looking somebody in the eye and having an experience and yeah, a complete vibration of exchange of thoughts and ideas.
yeah,
There's a reason why. Well, look what I think it's happening this week, right? There's a reason why our president and the president of Russia are meeting in Alaska.
mhm, mhm,
Why would they fly across the world to meet with each other? One, there's a language barrier, but when you're in the room with somebody and it's super something very important, you want to meet with them in person because you're going to get a
yeah.
much better idea about their intentions and all the variables that you couldn't do in just a exchange of a written word. So,
What's
and
interesting.
that's even through a interpreter too. I mean,
Yeah,
think of the
yeah. No,
language
it's
barrier. Yeah.
I just read something. I think it was 55%, but the messaging 50%, 55% of your messaging apparently is your body language.
Interesting.
And like 6% or 7% is the actual words that you use,
Yeah.
which is kind of crazy. And you know how
Yeah.
many people are conscious of their body language? Almost no one,
Yeah.
right? Because I coach people on that.
Yeah. Yeah. This leads to another whole other conversation about uh, generational communication. So I find that people, I don't know, 20s, 30s, even 40s, don't want to have a conversation. They would
Hmm.
rather text, um, which is really interesting, right? And we maybe over communicate. I'll speak for my generation. I'm not a baby boomer, but very close to it. But as an Xer, I like the ability to have a conversation with somebody because I can pick up even the timing. It doesn't even have to be a person to person meeting. A telephone conversation, I can get a lot more done by listening to them, their intentions, their pauses, what they're saying. If something doesn't, you can tell when something is not being communicated, then you can ask them to explain and makes a big difference. But not everybody wants to do that. And I'm not suggesting
No.
that's wrong or right. I think, I guess that, as I said, I think our generation maybe over communicated and they have every reason to be critical of that. Um,
Well, I was writing something the other day and I said something to the effect of, I made most of my money shaking people's hands and looking them in the eye.
mhm.
And to your point, but yeah, I think the subconscious concept is like if you just step back and if you believe that the subconscious kind of runs things, essentially 85 to 95%, that's running it to me, that's in
Hmm.
charge, and we have the availability of tools and many of them. And I've seen evidence of people. I think you've seen evidence of people that quote unquote have worked on themselves
Hmm.
and overcome something. So
Hmm.
we have living examples that this works. I think it's just a
Hmm.
question of back to one of our old adages: just show up, get a little
Hmm.
practice going, and show up and like do some reps, see what happens. Give
Hmm.
yourself 90 days. I think
Hmm.
you can change a lot.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wonder a lot, Jim, about my view of money because I've been on a roller coaster. Like I grew up with two parents that were born in the depression, so scarcity was
Hmm.
part of the conversation.
Sure. Yeah,
It was like frugality,
yeah.
scarcity. We lived in a very wealthy town, but we were not the wealthy people. We did
Hmm.
just fine, but there
Hmm.
was all kinds of wealth talk floating around in my hometown of
Hmm.
Winchester because there was a lot of wealthy people and not a lot of poor people. And so,
Yeah.
and then, I made a ton of money and then I lost it all. So it's like,
Hmm.
well, there's some shit floating around there, you know?
Yeah, no, no,
Yeah.
I think it's like you said, what you said is super important. And even what you experience as a child, being around money and what it means. I think when we created our framework, the worldview was just for that reason, right? We talked earlier today about we were even reflecting about some scripture and about
Mhm.
how that has influenced the way you view the world as a Catholic and the interpretation of that. Absolutely, that plays a role, especially if you're 10 years old and you're hearing a priest say something. You don't have the ability to really understand the context of that in relationship to the life because you haven't lived enough of
Yeah. Well,
it.
I'm glad you brought the Catholic thing up because it's been floating around here in my life for a while. And yeah, I don't play the Catholicism game well all the time. I probably don't go as deep as I quote unquote should. But they have, there are the sins. I mean, having sex before you're married, swearing, using God's name in vain, um, doing anything outside of the boundaries of the sacraments and the commandments. Some might tell you you're going to hell, right? Well, you lay that on a little kid. I mean, he's going to be carrying some shit around with him. That wasn't my experience. Like for instance, guilt is a big kind of component of Catholicism, but not everyone gives it the context that I think it deserves because I think guilt is it's an alarm bell that something's wrong. It's an alarm
Mhm.
bell that you probably should go do some self-awareness and then maybe there's an apology in order, maybe not, but and then you are forgiven. I think the problem with guilt when it's misused is people wallow in it and it crushes them and they can never get over maybe they were drunk one night and they killed somebody in a car accident and they can never it destroys their life because of the guilt, right?
Mhm.
So it's all of these things need context. I don't think they stand alone without context, but it's powerful
Mhm.
stuff.
Well, this is I'm interested in the cat. Obviously, I was baptized. I didn't grow up in the Catholic Church, but I was exposed to the Catholic Church and enough. But I also think it sends a mixed message. Is it a moral compass? I think it's a good moral compass, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think there is some value in having guilt because it does, like to your point earlier, it gives you a reference of wrong and right. And
Mm-hmm.
however, it also can be very confusing, particularly with American women,
Mm-hmm.
because it's saying be a Virgin Mary and shame. Especially when it comes to sexual things, and it's a very confusing message.
It is. It can be. It's also very interesting. As you may remember, my uncle was a Catholic priest. He passed a couple years ago,
I
and
didn't know that.
we used
Yeah.
to have some really good conversations. And
Yeah.
he would never take offense, right? But he would take a topic like that and he would wrap gospel parables, prayers, context around it, and was able to make it much less confusing.
Mhm.
And I think the one of the challenges with the Catholic Church is kind of like I remember Shakespeare in high school. It's like, what is he saying? Like
Mhm.
this isn't even English. Like what you can interpret that for good or for bad. And that's why I think it's nice when I read my prayer in the morning. It comes with an interpretation from a layperson, and that's
Yeah.
usually where I get my clarity. But yeah, the
Yeah.
Catholic
And by the way,
Church
this
sent
is just not the Catholic Church, right? Let's not pick on the Catholic Church. This applies to many organized religions. Look at the LDS, the Mormon Church, and
Mhm.
I was watching something recently about the ones that drop out of the Mormon Church kind of go crazy when it comes to porn and sexual stuff. Like I don't know if it's suppressed and they let it out, but there's a high level of pornography and other stuff that goes on when they drop out of the church. So I do
Yeah.
believe if you suppress something long enough, it's going to pop out the other direction.
Well, I
Um,
think that's an interesting topic. And again, I was thinking of my dad. He never pressed down on any things. He did two things. His words and his actions were consistent. And if I ever doubted anything, he didn't take offense to that. He encouraged the opportunity to further explain to me why he thought this might be a good idea, and then said things like, "What is that? Does that help? Does that make more sense?" Most of the time, I would say, "Yeah," but a lot of people, not like to your point, not just the Catholic Church, and institutions of any kind, right?
mhm.
They don't communicate with context. They make either demands of something, they insist on something, they use words like should or have to, and there's no like, how is there any room for why? Can you just tell me why? And then on the other side of that, people don't speak up, right? They accept things that they don't understand. I see that all the time, and that's probably the subconscious at work as well.
Yeah, again, this applies to even your childhood and what your parents have put. But one thing interesting about the Catholic Church, I always think about this, is they have this thing called confession. So no matter how bad it is, you can always go have a confession, and somehow you're forgiven. I don't know exactly how that
Dude,
works,
do,
but
do you remember
if
my
you
story about going to confession?
no, but I've watched the Godfather and some other mob
Yeah,
movies, and that's
that's an
always seemed to
interesting.
where they go when things get really bad after they get done murdering people and doing some bad stuff.
I know
Uh,
that they did that in The Sopranos too, as I
did
recall.
they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I went back. I started going back to church a few years ago, and I was thinking to myself, I want to go to confession. I hadn't been to confession in 35 years, and so I sinned a lot, you know,
Mhm.
and we all do. And I found this little Puerto Rican priest who I really enjoyed, and I pulled him aside after mass one day, and I said, Father, when do you do confession? He said, how about right now? And gave me a big smile. And he put his sash on and took me outside under a shade tree. And he said some things in Latin. And I told him, I really don't know what I'm doing here. And I've done some stuff. And he's like, Mark, I've been a priest for 35 years. I guarantee you, you're not going to tell me anything I haven't already heard. And he just made the whole thing just wonderful. There was no
Yeah.
pressure. It was, you know what I got? You know what my reward was? Three Hail Marys. And I walked out of that thing, dude. My feet were off the ground. It was one of the most powerful emotional experiences I've ever had. You want
Interesting.
to talk about stuff going on in the subconscious there, because you can't walk up to a priest not having gone to confession in 35 years and not feel a little bit guilty. It's just
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah. But this does open up a whole other conversation. Was it the fact that you had another human being that you could share something with, which now has been replaced by counseling, right? By having a relationship with a psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever, um, whatever way that I think as humans we have to have somebody to talk to, and so much
Yeah,
is either
it's a good
judged or
point.
held in, or you need a professional. But it's interesting, you know, at that time, that's who you went to. You, if you really were having a hard time, you went to your priest, and just the conversation, just letting somebody hear that, you wonder how much that helped. Yeah.
No, it was, I remember calling my father, my uncle, my children, my girlfriend. I called everybody. I was ecstatic. It was palatable. I'm sure it was relief. I'm
Mhm.
sure that my expectation was, man, I hope God's going to forgive me, man. Cause if I start listing the stuff I've done that might be called a sin, it's a pretty long list. And I
Yeah.
don't think I'm a bad guy. I can only imagine what real bad people do. But yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great point. That's a great point.
Yeah.
I think
I
there's,
do have a question for you. Again, and this applies not just, I'm not asking you to speak for the Catholic Church by any means, but um, like everything in life, some of these things, these traditions, these ways um, applied during that time period. And are they all transferable? And I'm even speaking of the arrangement between a man and a woman. The for there's a lot of things that we do by tradition that don't make sense and don't apply into modern day. And and you wonder if that is doing more good or bad. And again, I'm not discounting the value of of spirituality or organized religion, but I also can see. I've said this before. Let me use marriage as an example, right?
Mhm.
In my opinion, the marriage is an outdated um, concept. It was created as a social construct, and in time, and it made a lot of sense. But that's when we needed each other for different reasons, especially after what 1965, or when women had the ability to support themselves. A lot of changes were made, but yet some people are still trying to live this traditional life.
Yeah.
And I think you've heard me say it before when I say, and you're speaking of somebody who's been married for 35 years, right? So
Yep.
I'm not
Yep.
suggesting there's not benefits to it, but marriage should be like any other arrangement or agreement. It should have a time period. It should have but it shouldn't be forever just because that's what the Catholic Church
Yeah.
said, or some other institution said that. So I'd be interested in your
We
opinion of.
Yeah, yeah, I think we talked about this long time
We
ago.
have, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and I remember we're yeah, I understand your thought process, but the thing that where it kind of cracks for me is marriage is a sacrament, right? It's a sacrament.
What does that mean?
Well,
Yeah, but
it's a holy doctrine. It is not a contract. There is a legal component to it in certain situations and certain not. But I think there's a few things going on there, right? It's so I mean I went through the worst divorce in the world, so my opinion on marriage is like it wasn't. I didn't lose my opinion on marriage, but I've been dating now for 6 years and I'm not married. So this the the Catholic opinion on my life would be that I'm in violation of a couple of things, right? But then you can also go back and say, well, look at the disciples. All 12 of them were like not good people before they came disciples. They were whores, they were robbers, they were tax collectors. They were bad people. Like the adage of the Catholic Church and God is just like, I'm not here to help the people that don't need my help. I'm here to help the people that need my help. So there's so many different ways of looking at it. I think the fact that marriage is maybe frowned upon by the majority of the population now is not good for society. Um, do you
I would
have to
agree
get
with
married?
that, especially if we want to reproduce and raise
Yeah,
children
perpetuation of the
and
species, you know?
species, but also our country. There's no question there's some value of raising children,
Yeah, yeah.
but does that mean you need to be? It only takes 20 years to raise a child. Does that mean you stay with them for the rest of your life just because after that?
Well, we
It
all know
probably explains
people.
why 50% of marriages end after the kids.
The
Well,
question I would ask, Jim, is how many of those marriages are ending now because it's okay to end your marriage now? Like there are lots of marriages, and I don't know any statistics about it, but you've heard the 7 year
it's
itch and stuff like
50%.
that. No,
It's
no, no,
over.
I'm
It's
not
over
talking
50.
about the divorce. I'm talking about how many marriages, if society said divorce is really bad, and they don't say that anymore, right? So it's you have permission now. How many of those marriages, if they got through that 5 year period or 2 year period or 7 year period, would have come out the other end in a loving relationship to have somebody to spend the rest of their life with? I don't know that you can answer that question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody can, you know?
Well, you can't answer it by the statistics of an arranged marriage actually has a higher success rate than a unarranged marriage.
I've
So
heard
I
that.
think that speaks for itself, right? So
Yeah.
why is that? Well, because there's alignment of a similar cultural backgrounds and expectations. Yeah. So
There's a
like you said, it gets
commitment to the
complicated
no,
quickly.
yeah.
There is a yeah.
There's a commitment to the notion that this is for good or worse forever. And so those
Mhm.
two people walk into that arranged marriage with the same obligation or feeling of obligation. That's got to be a big part of it. But yeah, well, like you said, that's a whole nother topic for another time. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think this concept of the subconscious mind and self-doubt, I mean, it just an awareness, kind of a closing thought.
Mhm.
It's a thing, man. It's a thing. And
Yeah.
I think that if you're like, I go to church and I pray because that's my thing. It's one of my things, but I also meditate and I also do breath work and I
Mhm.
journal. I write down all the things that are bothering me, and self-doubt is at the top of the list, right? It's number one. And then I have things like comparison and pride and judgment and on the positive side, the most powerful one for me is gratitude. If I can get myself feeling grateful for my children, my girlfriend, my home, my health, it scares all the other bad guys away for me, you know. So that would be my closing thought.
Well, this you've heard me say this many times. We get bitter or we get better. The
Hmm.
default is bitter, and to have gratitude, that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of work to wake up every day and be grateful and to be appreciative to these simple things we have, no matter how bad things are.
Yeah.
Especially
Well, it's
if you're occupying your time with television and social media and things that you have absolutely no control over. They're projecting what their
oh,
happy life
they're
on you,
yeah, they're
which is
planting
not even
seeds.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just planting seeds in your subconscious. You know what I want to do is and I'll shut up after this, but I want to remember to remind everybody to please go give us a review and some stars if this stuff resonates with you, because I think if we can spread this around a little more to more people, it'll just be more helpful to more people, and feedback as well. Love to get some feedback. So, but yeah, I think that it's like anything else in life, Jim. From my experiences, it's hard, but everything that's good is hard. Most things, at least in my experience.
I do think though, as we run out of time, being 60 now, the clock is not in your favor, right? That the hour clock is the sand is starting to move a little faster than it was.
That thought's been on my mind too.
Yeah, so I do think that your world gets smaller, and that could be good. Smaller as in less friends, less people, less things, and it's probably better to eliminate people in your life that are not sending positive vibrations, or the relationship has run its route, right? Like it's to the point now where the level of excitement or energy or frequency is disrupted by too many past thoughts or too many negative
Yeah, that's a tough
experiences.
one. That's a tough
Mhm.
one. Cutting people loose is very, very difficult. But
Well, it
I
doesn't mean
think,
you cut them loose. You just don't let them influence your happiness or your
yeah,
outlook. I think it's easy just to stay connected to a group of friends or a group of people because it's convenient or because you feel obligated to. But if they're negative and they're sharing their negativity with you, then naturally you're going to be affected by that.
yeah,
And
you're going
if
to inherit some of that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's just that's just life. I don't think it's um, I don't think it's wrong or right. It just is. So anyway.
Yeah, I think it's worthy of attention and self awareness and practice.
No doubt. So, all right, Mark, until next week.
Thanks, Jim.